Okay, and today we'll be doing some inequalities. Inequalities means you have greater than or less than. Now first, before we start the problem practice, I need to go through something to remind you. So you got 6 greater than 4. Now remember, the nose should always point toward, it looks like a nose, it always needs to point to the smallest number for it to be true. So 6 is greater than 4. Now add 2 to both of them, just for the heck of it. So that becomes 8 and 6. Now remember, the nose points towards a smaller number, and the nose, so I'm going to write no change. There was no change in the sign. It stayed the same. So when I add a number, it's not going to change. Now subtract 2 from each one of these. So 6 take away 2 is going to be 4, and 4 take away 2 is 2. So 4 is the bigger number. Remember, the 2 is smaller, so the nose points towards that. And again, did the sign change? Nope, it stayed the same. So there was no change. Okay, multiply both sides by 2. So 6 times 2 is 12, and 4 times 2 is 8. And remember, the nose points towards a smaller number. And again, there was no change on that. Now multiply both sides by negative 2. So 6 times 2 is still 12, but it would turn into negative 12. And then 4 times 2 is still 8, but it would become negative 8 because you're multiplying by negative. Now this time, what's the smaller number? You have 2 negatives this time. Negative 12 is smaller, okay? So this time the nose points that way, and it changed. So write change down, okay? So there was a change there, change in sign. Divide both sides by 2, okay? So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now here's a smaller number, okay? And there was no change there. The sign is this pointing the same way it did originally. Now divide both sides by negative 2, okay? So 6 divided by negative 2, now it's still 3, but it would be negative 3. And then 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. Okay, so negative 2 is smaller, okay? Or sorry, negative 3 is smaller, so this time the nose will go that way, which means it changed. So there was a change. So we had a change here and here. Now, the reason you did is because when you have to multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, the sign's always going to change, okay? And that's why a certain important thing, it's important to remember when you're doing these problems here. Okay, now, this is kind of similar to the equations you solved yesterday, but they're not really equations. They're inequalities, okay? Greater than and less than signs. Now you'll have the bar underneath on some of them, meaning it could be equal, but it could also be greater than or it could be less than. So first thing you want to do when you're solving these is make your number line, and you always want to put 0 in the middle. You don't have to make all the numbers, just 0 is good enough. Now make sure all letters have a number attached to the front, so this X would be a 1x. Make sure all minuses have been switched to plus negatives. So between here and here, I don't have a minus, and then I'm on the other side of the inequality. So good. I don't need to change any signs. No parentheses, that's not a problem. There's only one X allowed, and we have it. Now dot and circle your X term, but when you do that, numbers inside the circle, those are the numbers you have to multiply and divide by eventually. Not right away, but eventually. So you have to decide if the sign needs to switch. And it's real simple. Is the dot number negative? Do I have a negative inside there? No, so don't switch the sign. Just keep it the same way. Okay, undo anything outside the circle by adding or subtracting. So we have a plus 5, so subtract 5, subtract 5. And I have the 1 dot x. I have the sign, the inequality, and then negative 13 minus 5 is negative 18. Use your calculator if you don't. Okay, now it's time to divide. You can divide, but you can just scribble it out if it's 1. And go transfer your work. After the division, you want to go down here. So put your x and then your negative 18. Now make sure the ordering of your answer is correct. When you have inequalities, you always want the letter first and then the number. And that's what we have here, so that's good. Now graph it on a number line. So you got negative 18, so circle. Now you have the equals to sign under the greater than. That bar means you have that, so you want to fill it in. And since the nose points that way, it goes that way. So x can be negative 18 or any number greater than negative 18. Okay, now my next problem. Number line, draw it. Make sure all letters have a number attached to the front, so the x has a negative 3. We're good. Make sure all minuses have been switched to plus negative. Well, there's only two values here, and they're on the opposite sides, so I'm not going to have any pluses or minuses, so I don't need to worry about that. Okay, there's going to be only one x allowed, and I have it. Now dot and circle that x term. So negative 3 dot x. And now we need to decide if the sign needs to switch, because I know the number that I'm going to have to divide both sides by, okay, at this point in the problem. Now, is a dot number negative? Well, it is. Yes, it is. So since that's a negative, that sign needs to now turn the other way. Now, undo anything outside the circle by adding or subtracting. Well, there's nothing outside the circle. The 27's on the other side of our sign here, our inequality. Now it's time to divide. But when you divide, you want to make sure, after you draw your lines and all that, you want to transfer your work here. You have x. You have your sign, which has been flipped because we're dividing both sides by a negative. And then 27 divided by negative 3 is negative 9. So negative 9, circle it. Nose goes that way, so there we go. Okay, looky here. You're going to make your number line, but you're not going to use this procedure because you got fractions, and that changes the game a little bit. Just make sure you have matching fractions, and then you're going to cross multiply and divide, but first you want to circle the number that's underneath the x. And it's a negative, so we want to switch that the other way. Okay? So we have x. And then to find the number that goes with that x, you just cross multiply and divide. You are going to be taking negative 2 times 5, the two numbers that match up diagonally, and then just divide it by 1. It's going to be negative 10. I'll show you here. Got it. So negative 10, circle. You want to definitely fill in your circle and the lines there, so that goes this way. Okay, my next problem. Make your number line. Make sure all letters have a number in front, so the x has a negative 2. Make sure that all minuses, so between here and here is a plus, we're good. And then I get to the sign, and then there's just a 25, so I don't need to do any plus negative. No parentheses, I don't have that problem. Only one x allowed. Here it is. Now I want to dot and circle the x because now I know what I'm going to have to multiply or divide by. We're going to have to divide by negative 2. So since we have a negative in there, that sign needs to go the other way. And we have a plus 11, so minus 11, minus 11. So I have negative 2 dot x. Got our sign, and 25 minus 11 is 14. Okay, now it's time to divide. And remember, after knowing what it divides into, we need to bring the work here because we got the x, and then the sign has been flipped because I'm dividing by a negative, and then 14 divided by negative 2 is negative 7. And by the way, make sure the order's correct. I've kind of been ignoring that, but so far it always has been. We got x number, x number, x number. It's when you have number and then x where you got to deal with that problem. I don't think I put any of those problems on here, but if the order's incorrect, you need to just switch them and flip the sign again. That's all you'll need to do, but I don't need to do that. So the nose goes this way. There we have it. Okay, next problem. Make your number line. Make sure all letters have a number attached to the front. So I got this X here with a -2 and this X here with a 6. And then also on that same step, make sure all minuses have been switched to plus negatives. So between the 2 and this, remember, now don't switch that to plus negative because it's not between two numbers, okay? So don't do that. But between here and here, there's a minus, so switch that to plus -7. Between here and here is a plus, so I'm fine with that. And then this number, again, this sign, don't plus negative that because it's not between two numbers. You're like, oh, it is between these. No, the sign's in the middle. Okay, now make sure you have no parentheses and only one X allowed, which is a problem here because I can see there are two X's. Now we got to decide if they're on the same side or they're on the opposite side. Well, here's my sign, so it looks like they're on the same side. So we're going to make our adding pyramid. Okay, and that means all you do is add what you see. -2 and +6. You get 4X. Okay, now before writing the sign, we got to add our -7, and then we can write our sign, and then -13. Now dot and circle your X term now that there's only one of them. Okay, so you have a -7 being added. So oh no, by the way, is that any negative inside of there? No, it's +4. So we're going to keep that sign going in the same way, greater than. Okay, now undo anything outside the circle. If there's an adding or subtracting, yeah, you got -7, so you're going to have to add 7. So you got 4.x. You got your sign. And then -13 plus 7 is going to be -6. Okay, now divide, but when you divide, transfer over here. So I have the X. -6 divided by 4 is negative. And by the way, the sign is the same because you're dividing both sides by +4. And then -1.5. There you go. So -1.5. Circle. You'll need to fill it in. And this way. The order was correct, too. Okay, next problem. Make sure all letters have a number attached to the front, so the X has a -3 and the X has a 2. Make sure all minuses have been switched to plus negative. So actually the 1 there, that already is plus negative, so we're good there. And then the 14, there's nothing between, so that's fine. There's a plus here, so all signs are fine. No parentheses, okay, there are none. Only one X allowed in the problem, and that's a problem here because I've got two X's. But they're not on the same sides, they're on opposite sides. So if they're on opposite, we want to switch the right to its opposite, okay? So it's a +2X, so we switch it to -2X to get rid of it. And then over here we got a -2X, but we need to do it under the -3X. Okay, so I have my 1, and then I take -3 and subtract 2. Think of a number line. If you're at -3 and you have to move 2 places to the left, I'm pretty sure you're going to be at -5. Got the sign, and then -14. Okay, and then keep on trucking. Dot and circle your X term. And decide if the sign needs to switch. Is the dot number negative? Yeah, it is. It's -5, so that sign's going to go the other way. Okay, now undo anything outside the circle by adding or subtracting. So we have this 1. Now the 1's positive, so we subtract it. So we have -5.x. We have my sign. And then -14 take away 1. That's going to be -15. And then finally it's time to divide, but remember to transfer the work over here. Okay, X. -15 divided by -5 is 3. Okay, so 3 is our critical number. And circle it, and it goes the same direction here. Okay, next one, make a number line. This one's going to be a little bit different. Make sure all the letters have a number attached to the front, so x has a -2. Make sure all minuses have been switched to plus negative. So between, that's fine because that's not between anything. Between here and here, there's the sign. Between here and here is a plus. That's good. And between here and here is the sign. So we don't need to do any plus negative. Okay, no parentheses. That's not a problem here. Now there's only one x allowed in the problem, and that's good. Now dot and circle your x term. And now decide if your sign's going to need to switch. Now the dot number is negative, but I have two signs. Well, guess what? They both need to switch. So they will both go this way. And when I have two signs, the end goal is to get x in the middle by itself. Okay, you should only have an x in the middle. Okay, now undo anything outside the circle by adding or subtracting. So I have that +7, so I'm going to -7 so that I can cross it out. And then I'll need to -7 under the -1 and the 9. Okay, you need to do it in 3 places. The middle to get rid of it, and then the outsides. So I got -1 -7, that's -8, and then the sign, and then -2 dot x. That's gone, and then I have my another sign, and then 9 minus 7 is 2. Okay? And now you can divide. So you need to divide the -2 by itself so that you can cancel. But then you have to divide this by -2 and this by -2. So I have negative, and then I want to transfer the work over here. -8 divided by -2 is 4. And then the sign, which has switched because I'm dividing by negative. And those cancel, so I have the x, and then that sign has switched, and then 2 divided by -2 is -1. Okay, so what I have essentially is I have my 4 and my -1. So all you do is put circles. Now you're not going to fill either one of them in because there's no bar underneath. You just connect them. Simply all that's needed. Okay, that's all I have to say on that today. You have 7 problems to do on your own. Let me know if you have any questions.